You could feel it through the screen. That trademark Stephen A. Smith energy, the rising volume, the exasperated pause, the head shake, and the verbal flamethrower. Smell bull. That's what I smell. And just like that, ESPN became ground zero for the NFL's spiciest headline. Because at the center of this eruption wasn't Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. It wasn't some veteran quarterback meltdown. Nope, it was Shedeur Sanders, the rookie who stormed into Cleveland's camp and ripped the QB1 spot straight out of the franchise's chaos-ridden hands. A fifth-round pick, a kid mocked as a social media quarterback. The player scouts claimed was too flashy, a rookie takeover, and a meltdown on air. Stephen A. didn't just report the news, he lit it on fire. His rant wasn't measured, it wasn't safe, it wasn't tiptoeing around, well, we'll see. It was Stephen A. at maximum flamethrower setting, obliterating every doubter who ever rolled their eyes at Shedeur Sanders. And the crazy part? The timing. Why was he this mad? Simple. Because Shedeur wasn't just quietly making throws in camp. He wasn't just impressing coaches in film study. He was flat out taking over. Marching into that Browns locker room like he owned the franchise, burying the depth chart, and turning practice reps into highlight reels. Reports leaked. Pinpoint passes, chemistry with receivers, presence in the huddle that looked more veteran than rookie. While other young QBs were flexing in selfies or still stumbling through playbooks, Sanders was cutting through defenses like butter. And Stephen A. knew the critics had set this kid up to fail, mocked, downgraded in the draft, buried as just primetime sun. So when Shedeur proved them wrong in real time, that was escape velocity fuel for Stephen A.'s favorite mode, I told you so. The Cleveland Circus. Now add in the Browns' signature ingredient, chaos. Cleveland's quarterback situation has been an annual punchline. Watson's injuries and baggage, Flacco's miracle cameo. The endless QB carousel that turned "Who's under center this week?" into a fan meme. So when Shedeur walked in, calm, collected, dripping with confidence, the contrast was blinding. Stephen A. put it bluntly, this wasn't hype. This was hostile takeover energy. Shedeur wasn't politely waiting for his reps, he hijacked them. He wasn't soaking it in like a rookie. He was commanding it like a CEO. And the moment the whispers became reality, that the Browns were actually preparing to start him, that's when Stephen A. went nuclear. Because for him, it wasn't just about football X's and O's. It was about legacy, about doubters, about the narrative that's always ready to bury athletes like Shedeur before giving them a fair chance. Stephen A. cooks the doubters. One by one, Stephen A. lined them up. The draft experts who skipped Shedeur? Fried. The scouts who said he didn't have the arm? Roasted. The analysts who claimed he was too distracted by Instagram? Torched. He pulled out receipts like a late-night comic pulling props. And every doubter caught the smoke. On national television, the script flipped. This was no longer Coach Prime's kid, trying to prove he belongs. This was the QB1 story of the season. And Stephen A. was narrating it with the kind of dramatic flair that turns sports takes into viral moments. Bigger than football. But here's the kicker that Stephen A. hammered home. This isn't just about a roster shuffle. It's about dominance, swagger, and the new quarterback prototype. For decades, front offices chased measurables and cookie-cutter personalities. Shedeur Sanders breaks that mold. He's TikTok ready, media savvy, custom suit wearing, NIL seasoned, and cold-blooded in the pocket. That combination rattles the old guard. To them, confidence looks like arrogance. Branding looks like distraction. But on the field, the calm reads, the pocket poise, the timing with receivers. Those are veteran traits, and Stephen A. never shied to champion a cultural pivot, made it clear. The league better get used to it. The hook for what's next. The intro wasn't just fire for the sake of fire. It was a siren call. Stephen A. isn't warning people Shedeur might be special. He's yelling it from the rooftops. He already is. He isn't gently suggesting Cleveland could hand Sanders the keys. He's daring them not to, and dragging critics who ever doubted why this takeover would happen. And behind all that noise, Shedeur just keeps working. In the film room, in practice, lining up balls so perfect they almost hum. The Browns didn't just name a QB1. They accidentally lit a fuse. And Stephen A. Smith lit the match on live TV, turning Shedeur's rise into the NFL's hottest storyline before preseason even kicked off. The buzzer hadn't even sounded on preseason, and Cleveland was already in chaos. It started as whispers, a few camp leaks, clips surfacing online of Shedeur Sanders dropping ropes like he'd been running the Browns' offense for years. 7-on-7 sessions where defenders looked like traffic cones. Highlight packages quietly posted by the team's media staff. And that one stat sheet from scrimmage day where Shedeur, the so-called fifth-round flyer, smoked the veterans with near-flawless efficiency. At first, people rolled their eyes. It's just camp. It's just shorts. But then it kept happening. Crisp footwork, chemistry with receivers, perfect timing on intermediate routes, and soon enough, those whispers turned into full-blown alarms. By the time the phrase QB1 leaked across X, it wasn't a rumor anymore. It was survival instinct. Fans lose their minds. If you think Browns fans are used to quarterback drama, think again. This was different. A rookie wasn't just another body thrown into the washing machine of Cleveland's QB roulette. He was the one winning it outright. Immediately, comment sections looked like full-on riots. Half the fan base screamed with excitement. Finally, a spark, a face of the franchise, a rookie ready to lead. The other half? Nervous wrecks. We've been burned too many times. Don't set us up just to let us down again. It was raw, emotional, and undeniably Cleveland. On Reddit, one Browns fan quipped, "This is either the dawn of a dynasty or the most Cleveland thing ever. There is no in between." And they weren't wrong. Analysts freeze in real time. Then came the media meltdown. Analysts who spent draft season dismissing Shedeur as just primetime's kid suddenly couldn't finish sentences on air. ESPN panels broke into awkward silence as highlight reels rolled. Talking heads pulled old scouting reports like receipts that had already expired. One pundit muttered live, "Wait, they're really starting him? Week 1? The lack of prep in their voices said it all. Nobody saw this coming, except Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A.'s thunderous flamethrower monologues only added to the storm. He called critics out directly. He mocked draft boards that had Shedeur ranked behind journeymen and mid-tier projects. He demanded why a rookie who'd never missed a start, who'd survived terrible O-lines, who had elite stats at 2 different schools, slipped all the way to round 5. The more he ranted, the more the story spread. Not just about football, but about how much egg was sitting on the faces of the experts. Opponents take notice. Meanwhile, inside the AFC North, rival fans and even rival players noticed. Steelers circles turned into therapy groups. If this kid is actually good, our defensive line better eat alive. Ravens fans side-eyed Lamar Jackson memes. We don't need another dual-threat magician in the division. Thanks. Bengals fans laughed it off publicly, but deep down, even they know Joe Burrow isn't thrilled by the thought of a rookie suddenly lighting up the division. Because it's not just hype. It's a quarterback change in the most brutal division in football. And the ripple hit faster than anyone imagined. The national ripple? Soon, Cleveland wasn't the only one buzzing. National talk shows shifted entire segments to Shedeur Sanders. Late-night hosts squeezed in monologue jokes. Social media artists started photoshopping Shedeur's face onto Cleveland royalty. And whether you laughed, doubted, or cheered, one thing was undeniable. Shedeur had broken into the NFL consciousness without playing a snap. The social media QB tag? Gone. Now he was the rookie starter at the league's most cursed position, in the league's most cursed quarterback city. That irony was too rich for the internet to ignore. The NFL's version of an earthquake. This wasn't business as usual. This wasn't another preseason fluff headline. This was the kind of bombshell that throws scouting evaluations, media credibility, and opposing defenses into complete scramble mode. What happens when a fifth-round pick strolls into camp, outworks the veterans, wins the locker room, and lands QB1 before September? You don't just feel shockwaves in Cleveland. You feel them across the entire league. Because now, every team with a shaky quarterback, every fan base tired of half measures, every analyst looking back at their draft grades, they're all asking the same thing. Did we just miss on the next big quarterback story of the decade? And until Shedeur takes his first snap under the lights, the frenzy won't stop. If you've watched sports television in the last decade, you already know the sound. That signature pause, the raised eyebrows, then the crescendo into pure thunder. Stephen A. Smith was in rare form. By rare form, we mean he dragged doubters like they tried to stiff him on Rent. This wasn't analysis. This was a sermon. And the headline? Shedeur Sanders isn't just ready. He's the Browns' future. Unleashing the flamethrower, Stephen A. opened the segment swinging haymakers at NFL scouts. He didn't just say they were wrong. He practically accused them of malpractice. How the hell does a projected first-rounder fall to the fifth round without injury, without scandal? His voice cracked with that familiar mix of outrage and showmanship. The producers tried to cut in clips of Shedeur's highlights, but honestly, Stephen A.'s monologue was the highlight reel. He fired off receipts like shotgun shells. Shedeur absorbing 90-plus sacks in college and still producing elite stats. His composure in the pocket against ranked teams. His ability to run NFL-level reads behind one of the weakest offensive lines in the sport. Every fact was another flame thrown at analysts who doubted him, dragging the draft experts. Then came the real scalpels. Stephen A. tore into draft analysts who confidently placed quarterbacks like Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, and others ahead of Sanders. He didn't whisper it. He howled it into the microphone like he was addressing Congress. You had this man behind dudes who might not even make preseason rosters? Stop the damn lies. The live chat on ESPN stream exploded. Browns fans were practically banging their keyboards in joy. Even neutral fans admitted Stephen A. was cooking too good to look away. Coach Prime factor. Then he pivoted, because this was never just about Shedeur. This was about Dion. Stephen A. reminded everyone why Coach Prime is one of the most polarizing figures in football. Loud, unapologetic, brash, and historically great. That swagger didn't come out of nowhere. Shedeur grew up inside that environment. He wasn't thrown into the spotlight. He was raised inside it. And Stephen A. asked the million-dollar question on behalf of every critic trying to dismiss Shedeur as nepotism hype. You think this man don't know pressure? You think he don't know how to handle hate? How to deal with being the guy everybody wants to tear down? He was born into it. This ain't foreign. This is normal. The line hit like a hammer because it reframed the swagger narrative. Not arrogance, but conditioning. Not a debate, a dragging. The segment didn't feel like ESPN analysis. It felt like a roast session turned courtroom defense. Stephen A. turned every lazy take into ammunition. He's just Prime's kid. Cooked. He only looked good in the Pac-12. Barbecued. He's too concerned with social media. Deep fried. By the time he was done, even the analysts on the panel looked like they were ready to join the Shedeur fan club. One of them muttered, "I mean, when you look at the stats, Stephen A. has a point." A point? He just leveled the entire anti-Shedeur army. Why it hit so hard? Here's why Stephen A's rage mattered. It wasn't empty noise. It was echoing a growing realization across the NFL. Every practice clip, every insider report leaking about his accuracy and timing, every highlight of him running the huddle with surgical composure. It all pointed to the same conclusion. The draft narrative was wrong, and Stephen A, love him or hate him, has the voice loud enough to make those whispers mainstream truth. Turning Shedeur into the story. Stephen A didn't just defend Shedeur Sanders, he elevated him. He turned a promising rookie story into a must-watch national storyline. Because now, it wasn't just Shedeur impresses in camp. It was Shedeur versus the NFL establishment. It was the rookie versus the doubters. Narrated by the loudest voice in sports media. And in today's world, perception builds just as much momentum as performance. Wrapping the segment. By the time Stephen A was finished, it felt like closing arguments in court. The jury, in this case, the fans and media, only had one conclusion left. They'd been sold a lie during draft season. And Shedeur Sanders was the walking, talking, spiral-throwing proof. And Stephen A made sure nobody watching could forget it. In Cleveland, swagger has usually been a bad word. They've had their fair share of cocky quarterbacks who strutted into town with commercials before completions, egos that crashed harder than the offense, and bravado that couldn't outlast a 2-minute drill. So when Shedeur Sanders arrived with that same unmistakable aura, chain flashing, confidence dripping, contagious energy radiating, a lot of people groaned. "Here we go again," they muttered. But then, something unexpected happened. The swagger wasn't empty. It wasn't an act. It was fuel. Confidence that translates. From the moment Shedeur stepped onto the field, he didn't look like a rookie. He looked like a player who already knew the job was his. In huddles, he didn't wait for respect. He commanded it. Veterans who'd been around for years admitted the same thing. The way he spoke, the way he set protections, the way he calmed receivers, it all screamed QB1. And then the throws matched it. Precision darts over the middle. Perfect ball placement in tight windows. Sidearm lasers under pressure. During scrimmages, defenders reportedly shook their heads, muttering, "How's he doing that already?" The swagger factor also showed up outside of reps. Coaches and staff whispered about how Shedeur carried himself through camp. Confident, unshaken, businesslike. While other rookies cracked under playbook overload or tried too hard to impress, Sanders treated every practice like game day. Early to film, stay late, ask questions, then clowning around just enough with teammates to loosen the energy. That balance, seriousness when it mattered, and swagger when the moment allowed, made him magnetic. Rookies don't usually shift locker room culture. Shedeur did it before his first preseason game. Swagger as strategy. Critics once dismissed his personality as too much brand. But what they missed was that the swagger was policy. It wasn't accidental that he'd roll up in custom suits. It wasn't just fun that he brainstormed touchdown celebrations with receivers on day 3 of minicamp. It was intention. By lightening the locker room tension, he made other players play freer. One wideout reportedly told insiders everybody was nervous at first. Nobody wanted to mess up. Shedeur comes over like, "Yo, what celebration we doing when you score?" Suddenly it's laughs, loose, and everyone's playing better. You can't teach that. That's quarterback psychology, the swagger weaponized to make the machine run smoother. Critics forced to rethink. The swagger factor also forced media analysts to rethink old narratives. When Johnny Manziel flamed out, swagger became toxic. When Baker Mayfield sputtered, bravado was a liability. So when Shedeur showed up looking even flashier, everyone braced for another disaster. The difference? Shedeur backed it up with discipline. On the field, it was precision mechanics and sharp reads. Off the field, it was film obsession, stuttering defensive tendencies like grad school homework. He showed swagger wasn't a mask trying to hide flaws. It was the outer wrapping of a foundation built on work ethic. Why Cleveland needed it? Here's the big picture. Cleveland didn't just need talent. They needed personality they could rally around. The Browns have had quarterbacks with skill who couldn't lead, and leaders who couldn't play. What they've never had was somebody who could do both, and do it with enough bravado to rewrite the Browns' battered image. Shedeur's swagger wasn't taunting. It wasn't reckless. It was a calculated branding of leadership, equal parts primetime confidence and surgeon-like delivery on the field. And in a city long haunted by quarterback curses, that swagger looked less like arrogance and more like medicine. The factor that shifted everything. In a league where rookies are supposed to be quiet, wait their turn, and blend in, Shedeur Sanders didn't play that role. He showed up bold, loud. He brought Prime's DNA into the building, unapologetic and unstoppable. And rather than alienate the locker room, the Browns leaned in. Because swagger without results is an empty promise. But swagger with receipts? That's the rare combination that flips a quarterback room upside down. And in this case, forced coaches to put QB1 next to his name. The swagger factor wasn't hype. It was the final ingredient that turned practice into takeover. And that's why Stephen A. ranted so hard. Because for once in Cleveland, swagger finally came with substance. For all the noise, all the headlines, all the lazy swag first, substance later slander, the truth was always sitting in plain sight. It was in the box scores. It was in the tape. It was in every Saturday afternoon where Shedeur Sanders stepped behind a paper-thin offensive line and still delivered like an all-pro. The receipts were there, and now they're impossible to ignore. Stats that cut through excuses. Let's start with the obvious. Shedeur threw 40 touchdowns last season behind one of the worst protection units in college football. For context, most quarterbacks under constant duress panic. They sail throws, force bad reads, crumble in chaos. Shedeur? He turned it into art. He completed at a high rate, routinely dropping dimes with defenders in his face. He kept turnovers low. He processed reads like he'd been in NFL systems for years, not fighting for survival at Colorado. And those weren't hollow numbers. They weren't stat padding against cupcakes, no matter how desperately critics tried that line. His best games often came against ranked opponents with NFL-caliber defenders breathing down his neck. He absorbed hits by the dozen and still delivered touchdowns. If anything, the adversity sharpened him. That's not hype. That's production at a professional level, squeezed out of a college line that leaked like a sieve. Tape don't lie. Numbers are powerful, but tape tells the whole story. And the tape on Shedeur Sanders screams NFL readiness. Look closely and you see fast processing speed, scanning option A, B, C, then firing to D in under 2 seconds. Ball placement that leaves receivers protected, hitting them in stride so they gain yards, not hospital bills. Pocket presence that feels genetic. He moves with subtle precision, one sidestep, one little climb, buying just enough space to launch heat. It's why coaches in Cleveland have already leaked that his ball placement looks like GPS tracking the football. It's why his chemistry with wideouts caught veterans off guard. Everybody expected rookie nerves. What they got was surgical confidence. Critic myths versus reality. Here's the thing. Every doubt about Shedeur has already been answered on film. Too flashy? Reality. Confidence under pressure isn't flash, it's survival. You don't drop a perfect 25-yard seam ball while a 300-pound rusher collapses on you, unless you believe in what you're doing. Stats inflated by weak competition? Reality. Against good defenses, he looked better because chaos sharpened his reads and resilience. He's not NFL accurate. Reality. His tape has receivers snagging passes without breaking stride. That's NFL-level accuracy, clean and repeatable. Every lazy talking point crumbles the second you actually look at how he played. Why scouts got it wrong. So how did he fall to the 5th round? Because the analysis wasn't about film. It was about perception. Once scouts labeled him as Dion's son with brand hype, every throw was reinterpreted through that lens. Perfect performance got brushed off as system quarterback. His NIL brand strength was twisted into a distraction, and his confidence was spun into arrogance. The NFL draft didn't expose Shedeur. It exposed how stubborn gatekeepers can be when a player doesn't fit their mold. But Cleveland couldn't afford stubbornness. They watched the reps. They saw the poise. They listened to teammates rave. And when it came down to picking a QB who could face AFC North defenses without folding, the receipts mattered more than the recycled sound bites. Receipts don't fade. Here's the bottom line. When Shedeur Sanders walked into Browns camp, he wasn't trying to prove doubters wrong. He'd already done that on Saturdays. What he did in camp was remind everyone who had been ignoring the receipts. And the scary part? Those receipts didn't suggest maybe he can develop. They screamed he's already there. That's why Stephen A. tore into analysts. That's why fans are buzzing. That's why veterans in Cleveland are side-eyeing the depth chart. Because the receipts never lied. They just got ignored until they couldn't anymore. The difference now is simple. Shedeur isn't just chasing potential. He's cashing in on receipts the league left unpaid for years. And in the NFL, that kind of overdue bill comes with interest. If there's one franchise that knows how to turn the quarterback position into reality TV, it's the Cleveland Browns. This is the team famous for that Vira fan jersey with nearly 36 names taped down the back. Each one another failed savior under center. From high draft picks to one-year wonders, from college legends to washed-up vets, Cleveland has made quarterback roulette into its annual holiday tradition. So when Shedeur Sanders walked in and suddenly claimed QB1, it didn't just feel surprising. It felt like the next chapter in the greatest quarterback soap opera in NFL history, Watson's Shadow. Let's be honest, Deshaun Watson was supposed to end the cycle. He arrived with a mega contract, touted as the long-term solution. Instead, between suspensions, injuries, and inconsistent play, he's become more of a cautionary tale than a franchise cornerstone. Even when he's healthy, Watson looks jittery, like a player trying to force memories of Houston glory rather than building something new. The Browns invested everything in him, and yet the fan base is restless, waiting for when, not if, he disappoints again. Flacco's cameo. Then there was Joe Flacco. The man was practically retired, probably buying lawn care equipment when Cleveland dialed him up in desperation. And for a hot second, it worked. Flacco lit up secondaries like he'd discovered the fountain of youth in his garage. Fans were euphoric. Analysts praised the nostalgia. But deep down, everyone knew it was a Band-Aid. Flacco wasn't a future. He was a cameo. One fun plot twist in the endless Browns saga. The rookie roulette. Add Dylan Gabriel into the mix. The mid-round prospect, solid pedigree, but does anyone outside of die-hard fans really believe he'll evolve into more than a decent backup? Probably not. Which left the door wide open for Shedeur Sanders, the so-called fifth-round flyer who turned camp into his own personal showcase. Suddenly, the Browns weren't cycling through tired narratives. They had a quarterback who looked different, younger, sharper, hungrier, unshaken by the city's baggage. Why Shedeur fits the chaos? Here's the thing. Cleveland thrives on drama. They're not comfortable when things are too neat, too polished. Every mistake becomes public theater. Every win feels like an underdog miracle. Shedeur Sanders fits perfectly into that culture. He carries the swagger, the confidence, the hype, but for once, it's backed by mechanics, preparation, and receipts. For a team cursed at quarterback for decades, Shedeur's arrival doesn't just feel symbolic. It feels like the Browns might finally be gambling on competence. The big picture. In any other city, a rookie storming into QB1 this fast would be shocking. In Cleveland, it feels almost poetic. The franchise addicted to quarterback chaos may have stumbled into the one player bold enough and good enough to thrive inside it. For the Browns, circus is the brand. For Shedeur, controlling chaos is the specialty. And maybe, just maybe, that's why his takeover works. The moment Shedeur Sanders was announced as Cleveland's starting quarterback, media wires didn't buzz. They exploded. This wasn't the usual rookie earns early reps type of headline. It felt like the NFL timeline had been hijacked. National media frenzy, ESPN panels froze mid-conversation. Analysts who had laughed at the idea of Shedeur starting before mid-season suddenly found themselves trying to explain away their old hot takes. Full-on verbal gymnastics. One person even muttered halfway through a segment, "Well, maybe the Browns saw something we didn't." Meanwhile, Stephen A. Smith poured gasoline on all of it. Every clip of Shedeur hitting laser passes at camp became ammunition for his daily rants. Every doubter got named, dragged, and cooked on air like he was hosting a barbecue. Networks replayed his highlights on loop, crawling with graphics like QB1 in Cleveland or "The future is now." Within hours, Shedeur Sanders went from a rookie most analysts buried on draft day to the league's hottest storyline. Social media chaos. If X, looked chaotic before, now it was pure chaos theater. Browns fans went to war in the comment sections. Half screamed, "This is our savior! Finally a QB who looks the part!" While the other half groaned, "Don't curse this kid before he plays a snap." Reddit threads turned into jury trials, complete with fans cross-examining each other with highlight reels as evidence. Meme accounts had a field day, photoshopping Shedeur holding Deshaun Watson's helmet like a trophy, or putting him on mock Sports Illustrated covers as next in line. Whatever your take, logging off wasn't an option. Division rivals start sweating. Of course, the AFC North isn't just any division. It's a battlefield. Steelers fans immediately pulled the doom lever. We can't stop Lamar, we can't stop Burrow, and now this rookie? Mavens fans side-eyed Lamar highlights like, we might want to practice harder. And Bengals fans tried to laugh it off, reminding everyone they had Joe Burrow locked up long-term. But none of them were blind to the clips of Shedeur dropping absolute dimes. They knew Cleveland, for once, might have a weapon instead of a liability. A shockwave beyond Cleveland. What happened in Cleveland echoed beyond the city. Suddenly, Shedeur wasn't just fighting for one locker room. He was changing the way the league thought about quarterbacks altogether. Instead of raw tools and maybe one-day projects, he represented a new formula. Polished, composed, brand-ready, and unafraid to dominate from day one. And whether rivals admit it or not, every defensive coordinator in the AFC North added a line on their whiteboard that week. Plan for Sanders. To chalk Shedeur Sanders' rise up as just football would be missing half the story. Yes, the throws are clean, the reads are sharp, and the mechanics look NFL ready. But what really rattles the league is that Shedeur represents a culture shift. The quarterback prototype, re-engineered for 2024 and beyond. Prime DNA. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Shedeur grew up as the son of Coach Prime. He didn't inherit just skill. He inherited the playbook for commanding attention under pressure. Deion Sanders turned football into theater long before Shedeur ever touched a college field. The timing, the branding, the showmanship, it was all strategy, never accident. Now, Shedeur is the living extension of that blueprint. He isn't just running routes and throwing darts. He's controlling narratives as effortlessly as he controls coverages. That terrifies the old guard, because for decades, the ideal quarterback was a quiet, polished face of the franchise who kept his head down and didn't rock the boat. Shedeur walks in with total composure and unapologetic swagger, blending skill with branding in a way the NFL has never fully embraced. Until now, media-ready leadership. Think about what it means when a quarterback is just as smooth at a podium as he is in the pocket. Shedeur can drop a 40-yard dime one afternoon and run a post-game presser that generates headlines by evening. This isn't accidental. His NIL run in college was trial by fire. He learned how to build an image, manage criticism, and keep his brand sharp while producing on the field. That polish is exactly why corporate sponsors are drooling and media outlets can't look away. It redefines value. He isn't just yardage and completion percentages, he's eyes, clicks, jerseys, and culture. For a team like Cleveland, that's double currency. Fear of the shift. The resistance he faced in the draft wasn't really about football IQ or performance. It was about discomfort. Too much personality, too much style, too much camera-ready, socially fluent, and still deliver under pressure. Swagger doesn't cancel substance. Branding doesn't erase discipline. In fact, in the modern NFL, those traits multiply each other. Shedeur isn't just redefining what success looks like, he's redefining what quarterbacks are allowed to be. And baby, that's the real revolution Cleveland stumbled into. A quarterback who isn't just built for the playbook, but for the spotlight. A QB who treats media buzz like oxygen, not distraction. A leader who makes swagger another part of the strategy. In other words, Shedeur Sanders isn't just changing the Browns, he's changing the blueprint. From the moment Shedeur Sanders pulled on a Browns helmet, what should have been a quiet rookie development arc became a full-blown revolution. In the span of a few weeks, he flipped the Browns' depth chart upside down, set Cleveland fans into civil war, forced rival defenses to circle his name, and gave Stephen A. Smith enough fuel to set ESPN on fire for the next year. But this isn't just a snapshot of hype. It's a statement. From underrated to unavoidable. Remember the narrative not long ago? Just prime time's kid. Too into Instagram. Not ready for NFL speed. Those takes aged like milk. The moment Shedeur threaded crisp spirals in camp, the receipts were shredded. The conversation no longer questioned if he could be QB1. It shifted to when. And when Cleveland confirmed it, the NFL's entire story arc bent toward him. Suddenly, a fifth-rounder became mandatory viewing. The Stephen A. effect. Stephen A. Smith took that shift and put it on steroids. His televised eruptions weren't just entertaining rants. They cemented Shedeur's place as the storyline, not just a storyline. In a sports world driven by perception as much as performance, having the loudest voice in media frame you as Cleveland's savior is like free rocket fuel. Every clip of Stephen A. yelling, "This brother is special," resonated louder because the tape backed it up. Swagger met substance, and critics were left with burned reputations and deleted tweets. Cleveland's gamble. For the Browns, this wasn't just luck. It was a calculated move dressed up as chaos. A franchise infamous for quarterback comedy now suddenly has a rookie who looks composed, poised, and built for their storm. They invested in the one player bold enough to thrive where others folded. It was more than naming a starter. It was rebranding the Browns' future around someone who can stabilize a huddle and electrify a stadium in the same snap. The bigger shift. Zoom out, and you see the deeper meaning. Shedeur Sanders is the prototype of what quarterbacks are becoming. Media-ready, pressure-ready. Branding isn't a distraction, it's a weapon. Critics keep underestimating players who control both the field and the narrative, and Shedeur is here to prove that the future belongs to them. This isn't about just surviving in the AFC North. It's about rewriting what quarterback leadership even looks like in 2024. The takeover is here. So what's next? Every throw will be magnified. Every win will be fuel. Every mistake will be dissected. But unlike past Browns disasters, this time it feels different. Because Shedeur isn't running from the spotlight. He's standing dead center of it, commanding it. What started as memes and debates has now crystallized into one truth. Shedeur Sanders isn't the story of Cleveland. He is Cleveland's story. And the league, they'd better get ready. Because swagger, substance, and Stephen A's microphone just linked up. And the takeover has officially begun.